Hello there guys, CD Mangaka here with another part of the Worlds Recap series that I am doing for each day of the World 2015 Championship for League of Legends. There's a lot to talk about today. A lot of exciting things happen. We get to see some champions, finally make it through the pick ban phase that we didn't see before, gets to see some interesting ways to adapt to that, as well as a surprising number of upsets as a couple of underlying problems with some of the teams, particularly the Chinese ones, are beginning to surface up. It was not a good day to be a China fan. So without any further ado, let's go on ahead and get started with the first game of the day, which was the ever wonderfully hyped match, SKT Telecom versus Edward Gaming. So if you know the history behind these two teams facing off, SK Telecom and EDG met in the final of the MSI tournament where EDG defeated SK Telecom, and after going to 5 games with them, Faker only played in 2 of those games. The last game he was infamously baited into picking his undefeated LeBlanc, which was very strong at the time, and EDG had a counter LeBlanc composition ready for it. So some criticism could be leveled on Coma for the defeat in that series because he played Easy Hoon, the inferior mid laner of SK Telecom, in those particular games, in 3 of those matches, rather than bringing Faker earlier or even playing Faker in all 5 games. But regardless, it's a long-standing rivalry, and both teams, like some people anticipated, came out very strong. They want to make a statement to each other, and they wanted to be very decisive. So it's a game that's taken very seriously, and we see some new things being shown here. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this up for you guys right now. So let me just, okay. And here we are. So we got the match details for you right here, as you can see from the picks and bans. SK Telecom goes with the very standard red side bans, where they get rid of the Gangplank, the Lulu, and the Mordekaiser. And then EDG targeted its Fakers with the Azir. Kind of questionable. I mean, Azir is a safe blind pick, and I mean, it's not going to be something you really bust out on the red side unless it's a champion that fits your composition. But regardless, they don't want to play it. Alistar and Elise. So what's EDG in this game kind of comes out with some questionable things. They go in with a blind pick Echo, which gets punished fairly well, or rather taken advantage of, not necessarily punished. And they also give Clearlove Jarvan. Now, we have to keep in mind that his Skarner was open for play. He's been using that a lot recently, ever since the 5.16 changes came out. His Elise was available. Granted, it would have been into a Rek'Sai, which is able to detect her despite her invisibility. Lee Sin is available here. Elise is banned away. Gragas is available here. For some reason, he decides to go for this J4 to kind of combo in with the Annie Callista bottom lane, as well as for Darius. The idea here, I suspect, is that he wants to lock down Bangs. I have to move that. Lock down the Sivir, so then that way you eliminate the movement speed advantage that she has by locking her into the Cataclysm with you. It really is an unimpressive pick. Jarvan just isn't a strong jungle pick. So a very questionable draft coming out of EDG, whereas SK Telecom has a very strong draft. They get the Rek'Sai for Clearlove. They go with this Braum Sivir bottom lane, which is going to be really good. And they also do some interesting things in the solo lanes. When they see the Darius come through for Amazing J, which was picked early on in the draft, Marin locks in as Renekton. And for Marin, he was scouted as being a Renekton god in the Korean solo queue, so it's one of his best champions, and he busts out here, and he wields it to really great effect. If you compare the scorelines between Amazing J and Marin, it's quite disparaging, as Marin solo kills Amazing J at least once, maybe twice. And it's kind of showing up as, like, Renekton being a fairly good counter pick into the Darius, and Darius is going to be a champion that we talk about as we go on with these games. Faker, on the other hand, goes with the Ryze TP in the mid lane, and we see a lot of these TP mid laners coming out in these games today, much like yesterday, really showing the versatility and the power of the summoning spell. Some of the people are crying out that it should be nerfed. I mean, when both of your solo wins can get away with it, and you have these champions that don't need these combat summoner spells, they're just be either strong enough on their own, or can take advantage of it. It really just is, it's really in a concerning spot. But with this advantage, Ryze on Faker is able to just scale through the mid game, In the early game, he's not as worried too much about pawn. There's a little bit of trading, gets a little bit of advantage on pawn early on. And SKT tries to go for gank on pawn, doesn't really work out for them, but that's absolutely fine. EDG is decisive in the early game. They go for this pick onto Faker's Rise, but they use both the Annie-ultimate and the Jarvan ultimate for it, and then they subsequently have a dragon fight, and this is where the mid lane teleport on Faker really shows up. He just got killed, but he comes right back into the fight, and SKT have a huge finish. They take the dragon away from EDG. They get several kills on EDG, basically killing their entire lineup. And then from here, it really is just like the Marin split push show. Amazing J has no answers for him. He's continually beating his head in. Faker is powering up through this, and it's a great pick with the Rise into the Kalista, because Kalista cannot dodge this targeted CC coming out from SK Telecom. This goes for both the Nectin and for the Rise. Now, Marin is just an incredibly dominant force in this game. Pawn does have some good performances on Echo, particularly in the team fight around the blue buff later on in the game. He's able to zone the backline, like the entire backline of SK Telecom, for a little bit to buy his team some time to try and kill Marin's Renekton, but at this point he's so far ahead, he's so tanky that they really can do nothing, and SKT decisively wins this over EDG and sends out quite a powerful statement. Now EDG is probably over prioritizing the Darius. It's a little bit of a confident draft from them. They bring in a not too good of a jungle pick right now, so I think EDG was playing a little more conservatively, and maybe in the rematch coming up next week between these two teams, EDG, just to even the score, just to make the group more competitive, and for pride's sake, maybe they'll get show a bit more of their hand like SK Telecom did here. So with that all being said, if you want to know how decisive this game was, there was a 9,000 gold lead at the 25-26 minute mark, which is a huge lead at that point in the game, and especially considering how close these teams are in terms of actual skill. So this is the first day, this is the first meeting of these two teams. Both of them are favored to win the whole tournament. SK Telecom coming out with showing some of their hands, showing some of the picks that they have in store. Probably still have more just in case, but definitely making a powerful statement in this game with how clean and decisive it was, as well as how smart Koma's pit draft and pick phase was. So with that being said, let's go on to the second game of the day, which we have to talk about. I initially didn't think we were going to have to talk about it because the Bangkok Titans are playing, but well, we have to, because Mordekaiser gets through the pick and ban phase. It's immediately first picked by H2K in this game, and this is the first time we've seen the new Mordekaiser in professional play. A couple things to note from this particular game is I really think that H2K had, or not H2K, but Bangkok Titans had an idea of how to do the Mordekaiser, but I think it was ultimately a bad one, and I also think that H2K's composition around it was quite poor and rather disrespectful, just because BKT is a quite inferior team. This mismatch in terms of the skill between these two teams makes it a little harder to judge fairly, whereas I feel more confident in saying that Renekton can securely just screw over Darius because of how close SK Telecom and EDG are in terms of a skill level standpoint. But in this game, it also speaks to a degree based on how hard it is for H2K to close this game out. So going through the picks and bans, or rather the picks for H2K, it's basically all melee. This composition has no siege except for Mordekaiser getting a dragon. The only range champion in this team composition is technically Elise, and that's only when she's in her human form, and that's not really any tower damage to speak of. It's got okay wave clear, fairly good engage, and it's really skirmishy, kind of pick-based focus. Whereas Bangkok Titans rather have a pretty standard comp. It's a Gnar top lane, Gragas jungle, Twisted Fate mid. I mean, it's fairly standard to them. I would have preferred to have seen a higher wave clear coming out of the bottom lane. I think with that on top of Twisted Fate's wave clear, with the it's not the wild cards, it's just with his Q. Can't remember what it's called. With that kind of wave clear, I don't think that H2K would be able to get onto the towers at all with their composition against the Bangkok Titans. And then furthermore, I don't think you give so much of an advantage with Mordekaiser in that lane. My philosophy is, it's a snowbally champion. He's not going to scale too well without a lead just because he's going to be melee focused. He's not going to have the lead that he needs in order to deal the damage that he has to. He has to get in range of everyone in order to try and kill someone. So it's a little simpler to do. So my idea is to go all in on him in the laning phase. Just pick to win the lane. with a lot of wave clear so that he can't really use his high level advantage over you. Something like a Lucian Cannon bot lane comes to mind is something that could maybe deal with the Mordekaiser, but this is simply theory crafting. Got no evidence to support that. Ultimately, the Vayne pick somewhat works, but I would have liked to have seen a higher wave clear ADC just to punish the Mordekaiser and to keep him restrained in lane. So in this game, the lanes are swapped, but they're standard. So you have the duos on top, the top laners in bottom, and H2K with the Mordekaiser are able to go with it. He has some. We see that he has some really good sustain in this matchup when he's paired with the Alistar, and then Lulix is able to come on up, get a couple kills rolling for them. And this game is just really scrappy, and Bangkok Titans actually do a good job of keeping the kill score even through the game, but the macro play from H2K just winds up being superior. Now, one thing, and I think the biggest thing that we can safely say about the Mordekaiser pick is that it doesn't make your comp good at sieging, but it facilitates good siege comps. What I mean by that is that we don't see this dragon be picked up in the early game and then put to use. It get like the latest, like the first dragon that H2K actually secure in this game comes about like the 15-16 minute mark, and then it tries to go to the tower, and H2K is a little indecisive which tower they want to go for, and the ghost dies without really doing a whole lot. The second dragon doesn't, once again, really doesn't accomplish a whole much of anything in these sieges, in part because H2K cannot really use it to follow up with because they're all melee ranged, and then there's some pretty decent wave clear coming out of the BKT lineup. And the third dragon actually does something, but there's a Baron buff with it. So it's hard to read how good the dragon is in sieges just because we have such a poor sieging composition from the H2K gaming. So perhaps that they need to pair it with more ranged champions that do a better job of dealing with towers in order for that dragon to really see its fullest potential of use. Fairly underwhelming debut of the dragon, for the Ghost Dragon from Mordekaiser. Ultimately, as you can see by the score, the Mordekaiser did very well. Hjarnan built the cooldown boots first. He went into lane with a Relic Shield, which he sold by the end of the game. He built up the Rylai's first for the slow, then went for Azonis for safety, followed by a Leandries, and then Abyssal Scepters. So we see a pretty standard AP build coming out of the Mordekaiser, favoring that kind of damage over building for the attack damage. So that's something to consider. Maybe other pros will go opposite and build Triforce with some other AD items, or maybe they'll just keep on doing with like this traditional AP build. Either way, though, it's just, if you want to see the Mordekaiser in action, pretty fun for that. Also, if you want to see some godly Alistar play, Kasing really prevents Bangkok Titans from coming back with their more cohesive comp. He denies so many plays from the team and sets H2K up and keeps them in the game when Bangkok Titans had just a brief moment to maybe make something out of it. So that's what's really the important things to take out of this game. So moving on to the third game, and this is where it continues to be just a poor day for LPL fans. We have LGD Gaming versus KT Rolster. So coming off of yesterday, LGD, they looked really good against Origin. However, Origin was able to keep up with them, which is a little concerning given the expected dominance of these Chinese-Korean combination teams. And then they lose the game with a team fight, and Origin decisively close it out. And halfway through the draft in that game, we see LGD kind of like suddenly have a split identity with what they want their comp to do. Their first 3 picks drafted for a Juggernaut composition, and their last 2 picks were going for like this hard engage all in on the back line, which is something that the Juggernaut kind of composition doesn't really thrive with. And here in this game, we begin to see it again. They pick up the Elise early for TBQ, and KT Rolster will freely just take the Lulu and the Braum. Now, one thing that we do have to comment on in this game before we go further with LGG's issues is how well KT drafted in this game. If you notice the pick and bans, there is no Mordekaiser to be seen. They left the Mordekaiser open, and they basically once again used a similar tactic to what Origin did and said, hey, your jungler has a limited champion pool. We're not going to worry about the OP stuff. We're going to ban the Lee Sin, we're going to ban the Rek'Sai again, but we're going to leave the Elise up, we're going to leave the Mordekaiser up for you guys. And we're not going to give Imp his Kalista up. Just no way. So they're targeting it like that. All right? Now, you can pick the Lulu, but then your jungler is not going to get his Elise. Okay? And then, maybe they'll likely take the Mordekaiser, or, and then we'll play it out from there. LGD goes with the Elise first for TBQ so that he has a jungler, so that he has one of his comfort picks. And then LGD grabbed the, not LGD, KT Rolster grabbed the Lulu, grabbed the Braum, which is something that you just can't play the Mordekaiser into because of how much they just slow him down. He is melee based, he is very slow, so against the Glitter Lances, against the Braum Ultimate, and the Winner's Bite, as well as the Polymorph, Mordekaiser isn't going to do anything, so LGD are forced to just let that pick slide completely through, and then KT Rolster opt not to pick it up. They don't want to use that pick. They're just going to keep on playing the game. They give Arrow his signature Kog'Maw, and they give Score Gragas. There's just plenty of options here for KT Rolster, and overall it's a beautiful draft that completely crushes LGD, namely because after grabbing the Elise, they secure themselves the Thresh and the Sivir, just going for a fairly standard bottom lane, giving PYE one of those champions, if I recall correctly. Don't quote me on that. And then they give Acorn and God V Hecarim. So they give Acorn Hecarim, excuse me, and God V his Varus. Now, God V's Varus is a really good pickup, but in the context of this game, it seems like LGD were going for this all-in engage comp, and then they picked this Varus for poke composition. Now, the problem with this is that, first off, from a damage standpoint, this team is basically all attack damage. The Elise is going to do some magic damage, but it's not the same amount of magic damage that you would see out of a Victor, out of a Nazir. So you have like this very one-dimensional comp in terms of damage. It's split. You have all these guys going in, but then you have this guy who wants to poke within it. It's just there's this schizophrenic element coming into it once again. And the KT Rolster have the answer with this, with the Malphite. Now this is the Malphite. This composition that LGD has, Malphite has wet dreams over this. Whereas he was crying yesterday against the Vladimir because Vladimir does AP damage, so he was forced to build the magic resistance. Instead, KT Rolster, with this composition that LGD is running, is able to build him full armor. He's got 3 completed armor items, armor boots, and he's working on a 4th one. This is great for Malphite because he scales so well with armor. He gains extra armor from building his armor, and he gains some extra damage with those things. So Malphite is able to be a huge thing, and someday really shows up big, and Acorn is not able to deal with him on this Hecarim. So the game goes out, and it starts on up. We get swap standard lanes. Someday gets an early blue buff so that he can just constantly push the Acorn in lane. He does get ganked by TVQ, but he's able to escape it. So he's not being necessarily punished there. But immediately Score answers with a gank in the mid lane that gives Godv over to Nagne for first blood. Godv flashed into Nagne trying to like pick up a quick kill on him, but it didn't really work out. Nagne played it out very well. So Godv's losing his lane against the Lulu. That's not going to be really good. And Score has just a phenomenal Gragas game. He just really just shows the strengths of this champion. Lulix, take notes from this guy because this is how you play Gragas. Plenty of flash body slams, great ultimates here. Score really showing up big for KT Rolster in this game. He gets Sunday ahead, he gets Nagne ahead. And then we have the fights break out on bottom lane, the teleports come on in, and LGD is losing these fights. Someday is just able to have more of an impact in them than Acorn is. Nagne with his teleport is also able to contribute to some of these. And then what's interesting about this as well, and like one of the signs that LGD is just really having struggle with players underperforming, is that Arrow and Peekaboo are actually capable of 2v2ing Imp and PYL. I think PYL escapes, but they definitely kill Imp in a trade. There's no junglers coming down. There's no interference. It's just Arrow basically taking a big fat dump onto Imp. Now, to be fair to Imp, Sivir has a hard time against Braum because the shield, the unbreakable wall, is able to stop her boomerang blade as well as a ricochet from passing on through and dealing extra AoE damage, but really Imp just overextends in these lanes and he gets punished for it. He's playing really cocky and he's being punished for it, and it's not really helping LGD out at all. With these leads that KT has, they just completely snowball the game. There is one... Is that really bad? No, that's the dragon, excuse me. I got the icons confused for just a moment. It's a very low dragon game. As you can see, there's only 2 dragons on both sides of the game, despite it being about a 30-minute long game. But the towers and what KT Rolster do to LGD is just really shows the whole story. And again, we see a 6k gold lead for KT at the 21-minute mark, and you have to keep in mind, this is the #1 team coming out of China. Arguably, EDG is better. They were having issues during the LPL playoffs, and LGD really stepped up during them. But LGD is just losing these games so hard. They did fair. They were even with Origin. They lost a team fight. Then they were just completely wrecked by the composition. Here, they had a horrible draft that was greatly punished by KT Rolster, and then they get completely just dumpstered for it. I made the point yesterday about Lulu mid with a tank top being a low damage composition. In this case, it's a little different simply because Malphite, because he can build all this armor, packs a lot of damage and he shuts down all of LGD. So that's like one of the differences here, even though it's a subtle difference within these compositions and why I'm okay with this really good drafting from KT Rolster. So every lane of LGD loses, which is something that we don't expect from such a stacked lineup, and KT decisively close out the game. Overall, it's a very troublesome group stages for China. I would have liked to see how LGD does with like a best of format in the group stages, like a double round robin best of 3, something like that, just so we can see if these players can kind of go, all right, here's the mistakes we made these adaptations. But right now it seems like LGD is having an issue similar to what we would consider a classic team solo mid problem, where they have trouble adapting to something that just comes up in the pick and ban phase or developments within the game. But as the series goes on, and if their opponents keep doing the same thing, they begin to identify their mistakes and begin to come together. So ultimately, though, LGD really underperforming in these series. KT looking just absolutely fantastic. So next game up, well, boys, I mean, I know what shirt I'm wearing right now. We'll get to that one in a moment. But so far, Europe is doing a fantastic job in their home turf because Origin versus TSM, amazing. Gets to trounce on some of his older teammates. So, and that he did, he didn't do too much in this game, but I mean, it's a really, it's a fun game. Anivia mid for Xpeke. All right, and it works out really well for him, actually. She was buffed to deal more damage to monsters, so that helps her take down the objectives of Dragon and Baron a little faster. Her walls in this game were particularly good. It prevents Darius from getting onto the back line. It cuts off a Lust Boy from making these retreats. Really does a good job bisecting the fights so that Niels can just freely hop around on his Callista and go to town. Now, I think teams really need to stop giving Niels his Callista because so many of them so far have been going on to Mithy for these engages and picks, so then Niels will just pull him back with the Fate's Call, throw him back into the team, and they just play really well around this champion, and I really think that, alright, it's just time to stop giving Niels the Callista. It's just time. You know, deal with these OP picks that are coming through, maybe drop the Mordekaiser in this case, and then draft so that you just can't play the Mordekaiser here. So it's really hard to say at this point, but Niels can't keep having this champion. He's just too good on it with Mithy. The lane swap comes out in this game, and I think it's just standard. Dyrus does a better job playing a little more conservatively in this game. He doesn't overextend and get killed so often like he was against the KT Rolster. Now, TSM, once again, they play the early lane swap very well. They get this early tower lead with the lane swap. Origin goes for a Dragon at the 11-minute mark, so Origin is getting these advantages with the Dragon while Team Solo Mid played for these early towers. But unfortunately, once again, TSM's warding game is just really slacking in this case. Origin, whenever they get pressure on a map, they go through the enemy jungle. It's completely lit up. TSM, not the same amount of ward coverage coming on through for them, and that's really hurting their ability to shot call and make good decisions in these games. And then furthermore, their team fighting is just completely horrific. There is, the game is even at the 20-minute mark. Origin still is leading with Dragons, though, with a total of 2. There's a team fight in mid that Team Solo Mid tried to force out, but Lust Boy on his Alistar doesn't have his ultimate, so he's completely squishy when he goes in for this engage. And then Team Solo Mid just basically crumble apart. They just don't keep up with Origin in these team fights. They don't have the same coordination. They're fighting when it's disadvantageous for them. And then Origin is just able to take this and snowball the game out of control and just close it very cleanly, very smoothly. So this and that team fight in the mid leads to a 4K gold lead, and that's basically the end of the game for them. So TSM is struggling as we expected through them. They're looking really good in the early game for the first like 10 minutes, but then just they don't make any plays. Nothing happens between that time. Bjergsen is doing his best to carry. He had he was comparable to Xpeke's damage for quite a bit, but it's just not going for this TSM lineup. Dyrus is being too weak. Santorin's not having enough pressure. Turtle's not able to compete on these carry champions with these other 80 carries, and then they're just uncoordinated. The control is lacking. Origin looking very good, being very clean in this game, wrapping all up in a nice little bow. EU better than NA, and maybe until we see Cloud9 versus Fnatic, I don't know. So shots fired. Moving on from that game, again, it's a very quick one. We get Man, it's just a bad day for China. It just really is, because the last Chinese game also ends in defeat. It is Cloud9, surprising mostly everyone in this group stage. Is it this game? Yeah, it totally is this game. Excuse me. Cloud9 basically denying all expectations. I mean, we expected them to go 0-6 in the group. They made a miracle run through the playoffs, being taken to 5 games in a series. Now to be granted, in their series against Gravity and Impulse, they were drafting questionable compositions, such as favoring Karma support in the Moonbu jungle for some godforsaken reason. But once they got back on track, they did a better job of closing out these games. So Invictus Gaming goes for target bans on this blue side. They get rid of the Veigar, they get rid of the Morgana, so they deny that from Cloud9. I think that's a good approach. Cloud9 is forced to go with the standard Gangplank, Lulu, Mordekaiser ban, and then it opens on up. Now Cloud9 goes for this Darius pick onto Balls, and it just... These teams are prioritizing Darius very early, but he seems to be very much controlled. And he doesn't seem to do a whole lot when he's put in these lane swap situations and he's starved of gold and these counter matchups exist. Gnar, for example, is able to contain him with like Frozen Mallet, so that gets really restricted. And Balls falls behind early. Now Kakao shows up in this game. He finally comes out of the jungle on his Gragas, makes some really good ganks and plays. Rookie on his Echo was able to solo kill Incarnation early on, and things were looking very well for Invictus Gaming at the start of this game. I mean, we're talking about like almost 100 CS lead on Zitai around the 15 to 20 minute mark. It's about like 70 range, I want to say. However, Incarnation is keeping up with Rookie in CS and actually starts to build a lead upon him. And then Sneaky is completely able just to outclass Kid. Now, IG's weak point is Kid. He gets caught out several times in this game, forced to use his ultimate, forced to use his heal several times just to try and survive in the series. And this is costing IG when they have such a stellar top lane. It's fairly good. One of the best junglers in the world, and Rookie, who is a really good mid laner. But Kid's mistakes, his mispositionings, they keep putting IG on these bad situations, and it's really costing them in these fights. And this is almost like a classic, like, old school Cloud9 game where they're struggling early, but they're able to hold on enough to where they're not losing in every lane drastically, and then High really begins to bring it on back in. High gets a lot of vision down, he's able to make some really good shot calls, and he builds up like this dragon control. IG gets 1 dragon, Cloud9 get 2. They get 2 barons with it. And again, like, they do this really good job of creating this pressure around the dragon, forcing IG to play around that, while they give Balls like this just prolonged time in the solo lane, letting him catch up in farm, letting him pick up in levels, try and not be so behind in this scenario. It's ultimately just a really good show of how to manipulate the macro game to try and compensate for the weaknesses and where you are losing in this game. It's a beautiful game. It's classic High shot calling, really. It's what I've loved about the team, and I put this shirt on today just because I had nothing else to wear, really, but, it's nice to see Cloud9 doing so well. So we see, for example, at 22 minutes, Invictus Gaming try to force a fight. No one dies. Sneaky's able to pick up the middle inner tower off of this. And one thing with the composition that Cloud9 is running is that if they are able to get these rotations off, they eviscerate towers. Rasan and Azir, that's like if you want to kill towers in 2 seconds, those are the champions that you pick. And again, it's really good control coming out of Cloud9, corralling Invictus Gaming despite their lead in the top lane, and bringing Balls up to a point where he's going to be able to, at the very least, keep up with Zitai in terms of impact. There is a messy Baron fight for Cloud9 where only Sneaky survives on their side, but again, he's able to really just do so much for his team. Cloud9's able to use his Baron buff and break down these towers, just again, because they do so much tower damage, and they really do just outfight team Invictus Gaming here. Just double check stuff. Rookie, again, he does very well at the first start of it, but there's just the Bard pick from Kitties. He misses some very important ultimates. There's this one fight at the blue buff of IG on the blue side where they group up for this team fight. They go for this pick, and then Azir, Incarnation on Azir steps on up. Sneaky gets into a really good position, and then all this AoE just rips through Invictus Gaming, and Cloud9 decisively turn it around. Kid's not able to do a whole lot of damage because, again, we see this Braum with the Unbreakable Wall stopping a lot of the ricochets from going off. It's just really, it's a really smart draft from the Cloud9 in some aspects. Again, I think the Darius is being over-prioritized here. It's just really great macro control from Cloud9 in this game. So if you want to see classic Cloud9 corralling some of the Invictus Gaming, this is where you see it. Now, to speak on the point of China not doing so well at this Worlds, you have to keep in mind that IG is not the third best team in China. No analyst that I know who follows China is going to say that. They largely made it through because of the 5.16 changes favoring them. So this is just like a really sketchy team showing up at the World Championship. LGD is having like these issues when it comes to their drafting. It seems like they're just an internal issue, and players are just not performing the level they need to. And Edward Gaming is looking as good as ever. They just got handed by SKT, but I think they'll come back and take the victory off SKT in the next game that they play next week. So the last game of the day. This is part 2 of Taiwan Strikes Back. We have AHQ versus Fnatic. So historically speaking, AHQ is now undefeated against Fnatic. They beat them at their one game at MSI, and now they have defeated them here at the group stages. It seems like Fnatic has this issue when they go up against a scrappy team like AHQ, where they kind of devolve out of their strategy, where they kind of like play down to AHQ's level, and it just looks really messy. In the first game against IG, Fnatic had a very controlled game, was very dominating. IG kind of just turned off and went back to their old issues of playing the AFK game, and Fnatic were freely given that game. Here, AHQ contest them a lot more, and we see Fnatic really just try and be way too aggressive and not play calculated. Huni in particular has a very bad game on Darius. He gets killed in a gank. He flashes over wall pursuing Mountain for a kill while he has all of his cooldowns up. And by the way, Ziv is right there, and he just gets killed for it. Like, he just over-aggressive diving all this time, wasting his flashes in opportune moments. It's a very poor game coming out of Huni. We again see the Narcana pick showing up here. Some containing Huni a little bit, but Huni's play in general in this game was just really subpar. Fnatic are able, there's a lot of Baron fights in this game. AHQ is fighting for these dragons. They get 4 dragons in this game. They are playing a very dragon-centric game. They're fighting around these objectives, which is exactly what they want. Now, we see the Tahm Kench show up here, and he actually picks up a victory in this series. He does a great job of keeping On's Jinx safe in these team fights by swallowing her up whenever she's about to be threatened by a shockwave, things like that. It's a very good play from the Tahm Kench. Really good show up for Albus, and On he just does so much damage in this fight. His positioning is great, his dodging and skill shots is great. Featherman does his best to carry, but it's simply not enough. And again, this is despite a really good start coming out of Fnatic. They actually get the 3 buff pickup onto AHQ. But Huni's misplays in the early game, as well as HQ's really impressive dragon control, just put them in these like bad situations. And AHQ really shows how well they can teamfight. This is the AHQ that should have beaten Cloud9 in their meeting on the first day of Worlds. This is not an AFKing Mountain. He's actively on the map, making plays for his team. Westor once again breaks out his Fizz, and he's able to get the damage down on the targets that he has to. Ziv is playing a really good game on his Gnar, and On is really just doing his best to carry on this Jinx. And Fnatic is scrambling around and kind of like looking really lost. This is a Fnatic that we haven't really seen for quite a long time. There's a lot of Baron posturing goes on, and this really plays into AHQ's hands. Now, Fnatic does pick up the Baron after there's a poor follow by AHQ from the dragon that they just stole, and Fnatic is able to pick this up, and they take the mid inhibitor tower, as well as I think they also take the mid inhibitor. Yeah, they take the mid inhibitor, but AHQ respond to get like a nearly clean ace, and this just keeps them in the game. And then they keep on doing these fights, and they just outplay Fnatic in these several instances, and Fnatic goes on to lose this game. So Fnatic showing that they do have some inconsistency issues, that they're not, when Huni is off his game, the rest of Fnatic just seem to also lose a bit of their edge to it. Minus Featherman, really good game from him. Shame that he had to lose it. And this is kind of reasons why that we don't expect Fnatic to go so far outside the bracket stages. Probably maybe make it up to semifinals, assuming LGD is able to get their shit together and perform in the best of group stages. Maybe, or not the best of group stages, in the best of stages in the brackets. When they go up against a team like SK Telecom that has really good players, that's really consistent, incredible macro play, EDG. Another team with like those similar characteristics. I just don't see how Fnatic, who can go into these issues, who could just like have these games where they tilt so hard, is going to be able to win out of these things. So either way, though, it's going to be interesting to see how Fnatic does against Cloud9 tomorrow, where we're going to see a less scrappy kind of team coming out from them. We're going to see Incarnation versus Febiven, and we're going to see how well Fnatic is able to play against high shot calling. So we're going to have to see how that plays on out and what occurs from there. So thank you guys for keeping up with this video. Another 35-minute little talking session, but shorter than watching all the games at Worlds. Again, all really good games. For their own reasons, and have their own insight. So thank you for watching this. CD Mangaka, signing out.